This is the video I never wanted to make. I've been pushing it off for quite some time now, but it's gotten to a point where I feel like it has to be said. I want my channel to be about the beauty of Eretz Yisrael, the holiness and the importance of living in this sacred land. I don't want to be a fearmonger or a conspiracy theorist, but at a certain point, you just got to talk about the cold facts on the ground. The time has come for Jews to get out of America and any other country that they're in. Many Jews in America, including rabbis and famous speakers, claim that comparing the current situation in the US to pre-war Nazi Germany is an extremist ideology meant to simply scare Jews in America into feeling fearful and pushing them to move to Eretz Yisrael. But the truth is, that is 100% correct. What's happening in America and Europe is extreme. Jews should be fearful, and leaving America to come to Eretz Yisrael is the smartest thing that every single Jew can possibly do. So let me explain. The comparison of the US to Nazi Germany is obviously not a comparison to the full-scale Holocaust and mass genocide. It's a comparison to the late 1920s and early 1930s, when antisemitism was dramatically rising, and Jews all over Germany were yelling the famous last words. It can't happen here. But unfortunately, it can. And it did. It happened hundreds of times before, both on large and small scales. In almost every country the Jews have ever lived in, we were either exterminated or exiled. Now that's not an opinion, that's a fact. Now obviously the comparison is not exact. No two events are equal. But you better believe that you can compare the US to Nazi Germany in many significant ways. Truth be told, the reason many Jews can't see the clear comparison is simply due to ignorance. What most people know is that the Jews were doing quite well in Germany. Then things took a turn for the worse, and then bam, 6 million dead Jews. But the fact is, there were 10 to 15 years of anti-Semitism brewing, slowly spreading throughout the country, long before Hitler came into power. So first off, people claim you can't compare the two, because in America, no one is proposing to kill all the Jews, and in Germany, they did. But that is completely untrue. In Germany, even after 10 years of anti-Semitic conspiracy theories and propaganda, the Nazis still did not support mass murdering Jews. They simply wanted to make life as difficult as possible for the Jews, so that they would leave on their own. Then even in 1933, when Hitler rose to power, the Nazis still had no plans to exterminate the Jews. They only kept pushing harder and harder to get them to leave on their own. Between 1933 and 1938, concentration camps started being developed, but not for the sake of killing Jews. They were set up to imprison political opponents of Hitler and other people that the Nazis felt were the dregs of society. And although they did start sending Jews to these camps, it was used mostly for forced labor and imprisonment. Even all the way up till 1940, they were still mostly only trying to expel the Jews. The Germans even proposed something called the Madagascar Plan as a solution to the Jewish problem, hoping to ship all the Jews off to Madagascar. But only in the spring of 1940 did the Nazis realize that deporting millions of Jews would be an impossible task. And so it was then decided that genocide was the only answer. All in all, it took over 20 years of propaganda and brainwashing, till they got to the point of mass murdering Jews. And even then, the majority of the Germans never supported the full genocide of the Jewish people. They simply turned a blind eye to it. Now it has not even been 2 years since October 7th, which sparked the most recent surge of anti-Semitism. And look at the world around you. The fact is, the mass increase of anti-Semitism, both in the US and around the world, is spreading significantly faster than it did in Germany. And let me explain why. When Hitler came into power in 1933, he immediately appointed a man named Joseph Goebbels to be his chief propagandist for the Nazi Party, slowly feeding the Germans with lies and conspiracies that the Jews were evil and responsible for all of the Germans' problems. It took many years of this propaganda, till they got enough Germans to hate the Jews enough to start committing violent crimes against them. Now for Joseph Goebbels, his key tools in spreading these lies was the radio and the newspapers. Nowadays, we have cell phones, internet, TV, movies, music, and an unlimited supply of the most highly effective brainwashing system that man has ever created. It's called social media. And it's 100 times more effective than the radio or newspapers ever were. And we don't just have Joseph Goebbels as the chief anti-Semitic propagandist. No, we've got a lot more. We've got BBC, CNN, NBC, The New York Times, The Guardian, The Wall Street Journal, Kanye West, Jake Shields, Andrew Tate, Candace Owens, Tucker Carlson, and thousands more, all with millions, some tens or hundreds of millions of followers, who swallow up their every word. And they are all more than happy to lead the crowds with their never-ending, Jew-hating rhetoric. Human beings have an unbelievable power of something called repression. It's the unconscious act of keeping certain thoughts, feelings, or memories out of conscious awareness to avoid emotional pain or conflict. Repression can sometimes be very good, and other times it can be suicidal. Every time we see in the news a violent act against another Jew, we gasp. We say, "This is terrible!" But then repression kicks in, and we move on. 3 days later, we see the next anti-Semitic incident, and we gasp again, feeling as if this is the first time it happened. The cycle goes on, but our brains and our memory never truly let us understand the extent of what's taking place. I remember asking my fellow Jews a few years ago, what would it take for you to feel that you needed to get out of America? Most people answered, well, there's always going to be anti-Semitism in the world, but when things start getting violent, it'll be obvious, and we'll know. When they protest in America and chant anti-Zionistic slogans, we say it's against Israel, not the Jews. When they turn the word Zionist into the word Jew and chant out with the Jews, we say, well, it's just words. When they beat Jews in the street, we say, well, it didn't happen in my neighborhood. When a Jew gets beaten in your neighborhood, we say, it was an isolated incident. And when it's no longer an isolated incident, and it isn't even just a beating, but now that Jews have actually been murdered in America more than once, what do Jews do? They buy guns, pump up security in front of schools and shuls, and when all else fails, instead of coming home to Eretz Yisroel, they run off to Florida, because the almighty Ron DeSantis is going to save you. Now, obviously, the anti-Semitic violence, as of now, is nowhere near that of 1940s Nazi Germany, or any other of the hundreds of full-scale mass murder pogroms that took place all around Europe. But like I said, it's spreading fast. And as any perceptive person would admit, it's happening a whole lot faster than we could have ever imagined. And you don't have to take my word for it. Just take a quick look at what these reporters have to say.
Anti-Semitic attacks are rattling the Jewish community in Brooklyn.
Wave of anti-Semitic attacks.
A rising number of anti-Semitic attacks.
Harassing Jewish students on campus.
Recent attacks against Jewish residents.
Deadliest attack on Jews in American history.
These acts of violence are putting a new reality in place for Jewish people.
Jewish centers in New York, Oregon, and Massachusetts vandalized.
2 Israeli embassy staffers were shot and killed.
The U.S. has recorded its highest number of anti-Semitic incidences.
A Jewish man was violently assaulted in front of children at a park.
Randomly attacked a Jewish man.
Firing a BB gun at a Jewish father.
A gang assault of a Jewish man last night.
An anti-Semitic attack outside of a restaurant.
Any kind of gathering we do, we are going to have armed security. That's our reality.
Now, I'd like to make myself very clear. I'm not saying that America is going to turn into Nazi Germany. I'm not saying they're going to mass murder all the Jews. What I am saying is to think that there's no comparison between what America looks like now and pre-war Germany is simply ignorance. To say that it can't happen here is senseless denial. And what will come of America in the coming years, nobody knows. But if you're a Jew, it's not looking really good. But what I will confidently say is there is absolutely no future for the Jewish people outside of Eretz Yisrael. And since October 7th, the world has made that abundantly clear. Now, I know what many of you are thinking. The violence might be rising, but it's nowhere near the levels of violence and terrorism that are taking place in Eretz Yisrael. Well, I'll be perfectly honest. That's 100% true. So why would someone leave America or Europe for Eretz Yisrael? Well, putting aside the fact that it's one of the greatest mitzvos in the Torah and the holiest place in the world for every Jew to live, and every single Jew should come here just for those reasons alone, I'll explain exactly why it makes complete sense for Jews to leave America for Eretz Yisrael, and why you simply can't compare the two. In Eretz Yisrael, we know exactly who our enemies are, and in most situations, there are large fences and security separating the Arabs from the Jews. Here in Eretz Yisrael, most Arabs are fearful of the Jews because we stand tall. We have a powerful Jewish army, many Jews have guns, and overall, the Jewish population here is becoming tougher by the day, slowly driving out the enemy. We're getting closer to annexing Yehuda v'Shamron, Judea and Samaria, where the vast majority of the terrorists come from. And more stores and businesses are finding alternatives to Arab labor. It's true we still have some very serious problems in the government here, but overall, the Jewish mentality and Torah values are increasing by the day, leading towards a much stronger, safer, and holier Eretz Yisrael. In America, it's the exact opposite. Jews are defenseless, making up maybe 2% of the population, with no real means of security, hate crimes at an all-time high, and a major decrease of public support and sympathy. The future is not looking good for American Jews. In Israel, the mentality is walk with a head raised high. Be a proud, strong Jew. The Geula is near, and this is our time. In America, the mentality is the opposite. The mentality is we're in exile. Lay low and don't attract too much attention. Wear a baseball cap. Just as in Germany when Hitler rose to power and it became legal to persecute Jews, millions of Germans turned against their Jewish neighbors and were more than happy to watch the Jews suffer. The same is becoming abundantly clear in America. When Jews get harassed, when they are beaten in the streets, do you ever see anyone stand up against it? No. They pull out their cell phones and take good videos so they can get views on YouTube. Are there mass protests by Americans calling for an end to the violent anti-Semitic attacks? Or do they quietly sit on the sidelines, enjoying the downfall of the Jew? When thousands of Americans riot in the streets in every major city in America, calling for the death to Israel, expel the Jews, globalized intifada, do the police shut it down, or are they commanded to stand quietly and let the hate spread? When radical anti-Semitic politicians, such as Mamdani, the jihadist, runs for mayor in the biggest Jewish city in the US, does he get shut down, or does he have the overwhelming majority of votes? So keep telling yourself, it can't happen here. Now I'd like to address another major difference between the US and Eretz Yisroel. In the US, the older population, aged 60 and up, are majority Republican and heavily lean to the right. The younger population, on the other hand, aged 30 and under, heavily lean to the left, with over 65% being Democratic. And these numbers are increasing faster and faster with all the social media propaganda and college brainwashing, which means the older generation of sane, decent Americans are slowly dying out. And the new, younger generation, the future population, the future leaders of America, are overwhelmingly leftist, socialist, anti-God, and of course, heavily anti-Semitic. On the other hand, in Eretz Yisroel, although many like to claim that this is a secular country, with the majority of the Jews being non-religious, this is changing dramatically. Data shows that currently, 53% of the Jews in Eretz Yisroel under the age of 30 are now Shomer Shabbos, with only 14% of Jews over the age of 40 being Shomer Shabbos. The exact opposite of America. Eretz Yisroel is becoming increasingly more religious, with the younger generation becoming more and more right-wing, pro-Torah values, and more in favor of throwing out the enemy. To make this as clear as possible, here's a graph of the decline of America's moral values and the increase of those in Eretz Yisroel. We may look like we're in a similar playing field to anyone trying to ignore the truth. But to any thinking person, it is clear which country holds the future of Klal Yisrael and which one holds its destruction. Now lastly, of course, the number one reason that Eretz Yisroel is safer for Jews than America is because the creator of the universe said so. As it says in Devarim, a land that the Lord your God cares for. The eyes of the Lord your God are always upon it, from the beginning of the year until the end of the year. This divine protection is not true for the US or Europe. Or like it says in Zechariah, on that day God will shield the inhabitants of Yerushalayim, and the weakest among them shall be on that day like King David, and the house of David, like a divine being, like an angel of God at their heads. On that day I will all but annihilate all the nations that came up against Yerushalayim. Now I consider all day quoting verses from the Torah, stating that Hashem will protect the Jews of Eretz Yisrael, and that our only future lies here. But I think this video is long enough. To anyone with eyes in his head, it is obvious what's going on in the world. They're not hiding it, and neither is God. In past generations, Jews fled from one city to the next, and from one country to another. But Eretz Yisrael was never really a viable option. But today, Hashem has changed that. As he increases the hate towards Jews all around the world, he simultaneously builds up Eretz Yisrael. It truly is ridiculous that millions of Jews don't see what's going on right in front of them, and they simply don't get the hint. Ignorance is not bliss. I suggest every Jew buys 2 books, a book on Jewish history and the Tanakh. Read both of them and decide for yourself. Chazak ve'ematz. Be strong and courageous to make the smartest decision of your life.